takes pleasure in attracting a stellar list of speakers that address today's most relevant issues. The club's place as a refuge for rich discussion and networking has never wavered after 123 seasons.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Anita McCuitt, and I'm president of the Canadian Club of Toronto and your host for this timely and exciting event. Aujourd'hui, je suis très heureuse de souhaiter la bienvenue à Madame, la vice-première ministre et ministre des Finances du Canada. Avant de l'introduire, j'aimerais faire la reconnaissance au territoire traditionnel. While we may be gathering virtually in places across the country, it's important to acknowledge the traditional lands on which we all gather today. On this day after Earth Day, I'd like to recognize the contributions of the Indigenous peoples that have come before us and thank them for taking care of the land and the water. We're mindful of our responsibility to carry forward those efforts so that the land and water can continue to be enjoyed for many generations to follow. Today, we're extremely pleased that Canada's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance is here with us to provide details about the government's recently released budget. And before we hear from the minister, I do want to make sure that you will all be able to participate in today's program. The click here to switch stream button helps if you find that your internet is slow. The video quality may decrease, but the audio should remain strong. And we do want your questions today. So just click the questions tab, enter your questions in the window, and they'll be passed on directly to our moderator. We're delighted to be partnering with Catalyst Canada, workplaces that work for women, to bring you this morning's event. And today's gathering would not be possible or complimentary without the generous support of our sponsor, Canada Life. Thank you. One of the club's traditions that we continue to maintain in our virtual setting is the toast that we make to our country at the start of every event. So if you have a beverage nearby, please join me in a toast. To Canada, oh Canada. And now it's time to formally introduce today's special guest. On Monday, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance released Budget 2021, a recovery plan for jobs, growth, and resilience. It represents the government's plan to win the battle against a devastating global pandemic and provide hope and encouragement to all Canadians through a strong economic recovery. Minister Freeland has been at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19, and her deep experience in government and in influential ministerial roles has helped build resilience at a challenging time. In her 8 years on Parliament Hill, she's been Minister of International Trade and Minister of Foreign Affairs. In 2019, she became Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. And last August, the finance portfolio was added to her Deputy Prime Ministerial role. It's her resilience and ability to fight for the dreams of Canadians that she hopes to harness in the government's ambitious plans for economic recovery. Today, Minister Freeland will be joined in conversation by David Simmonds, Senior Advisor at the Canadian Centre for the Purpose of the Corporation and a visiting professor at Western University, and President-elect of the Canadian Club Toronto. After the question and answer portion of our time together, the Executive Director of Catalyst Canada, Vandana Juneja, will join us to wrap things up. Deputy Prime Minister, David, the Canadian Club podium is yours.
Thanks, Anita. It's really wonderful to be here today and to have the Deputy Prime Minister with us. Deputy Prime Minister, there's a lot of questions, a lot of content for a very, very big budget that's very ambitious for sure. So before we get into it, I thought I'd give you an opportunity to address Canadians at the start. So over to you.
Well, thank you very much, David. Please call me Chrystia. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for taking time at the end of what I am sure has been a busy week to talk about Canada and to talk about our budget. I'll just say a couple of words about the objectives of this budget. And, you know, when you go home tonight and you talk to your families, or actually I probably should say, when you move to a different room tonight and talk to your families, if you tell them one thing about this conversation, the thing I hope you'll tell them is that this budget is a plan for jobs and growth. That was the overriding objective we had, and we have. And I would divide that effort into three parts. Part one is we need to finish the fight against COVID. As many of us know really painfully right now, as Canada is fighting a virulent third wave of the virus, COVID is still here. And the first commitment of this budget is to continue to do whatever it takes to finish the fight against COVID. And that very much includes extending support to people and to businesses, because we know that it's needed. Second thing that the budget is laser focused on is a strong, robust, and swift recovery from the COVID recession. Canadians, I think it was Anita who talked about Canadians being really resilient, and I agree with that. And I just admire people, entrepreneurs, the way that people have found a way to keep on going in these unprecedented circumstances. But we're still 500,000 jobs short of where we were before the pandemic started. And I really believe, our government really believes, that we need to urgently get Canada to work, have a recovery which is robust, have a recovery which is swift. We can't let economic hardship linger. And so this budget is focused on that. And then the third thing in this budget is we really think that we need to invest for long-term growth for Canada and for Canadians. And this budget includes some really significant investments to help boost Canada's long-term ability to grow, Canada's long-term ability to be prosperous. You know, things like significant green investments, things like investments in social infrastructure like early learning and childcare, things like investments to help small businesses go digital, adopt new technologies. So that's what this budget is built to do. Finish the fight against COVID, recover from the COVID recession, and boost our country's long-term growth. And I'm happy to talk to you about it now, David.
That's great, Minister. And those are three very clear objectives. Just to give context to our viewers, there are close to 2,000 viewers online with us right now from across Canada. So we usually would be in a ballroom. I can't believe I'm saying this, Minister, but I miss the rubber chicken and the lukewarm eggs that we would normally be having post-budget. But we have Canadians from Alberta, British Columbia, from Quebec, across sectors. So I think we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation. I want to give context to who's in the room. I also want to acknowledge, before I ask you the difficult questions around the budget, acknowledge that it's the biggest budget, but it's also a first, right? It's the first time we have a budget in Canada tabled by someone that looks like you, that has the history you have, and that's leading the way you're leading. And so I think it's just important to acknowledge that today on our podium, the oldest podium of record in our great country. You mentioned a swift recovery. One of the things that's being talked about regularly by pundits, by Canadians, is the plan for early childhood education. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that investment. It's significant, and why it's a lead plank in your government's budget. Tell us a little bit more about that.
OK, merci beaucoup David pour la question. Et je vais commencer en disant quelques mots en français pour remercier le Québec, pour souligner le leadership du Québec et surtout pour souligner le leadership et le travail acharné des féministes du Québec. Parce que je pense qu'une des raisons que c'est possible maintenant de commencer le grand travail de créer un système de garderies autour du Canada, c'est grâce au leadership des féministes du Québec qui l'ont déjà fait chez eux. Ils ont donné le modèle et l'exemple. Bravo, mesdames. Je suis très, très reconnaissante de votre travail. So, thanks for highlighting that, David. And it is definitely one of the key elements in the budget. This is for sure something that feminists have been campaigning for more than 50 years. The Royal Commission on the Status of Women first recommended that the Government of Canada urgently set about building a system for early learning and childcare 50 years ago, David.
Mm-hmm.
I was just over 2 years old at the time. So people have been trying to do this for a long time. In Quebec, they've succeeded. And now it's time for the rest of Canada to do it too. And I really believe that this is smart. This is, of course, a great feminist issue and something feminists have wanted for a long time. But I really want to emphasize this is smart economic policy. So what we're committing to is, first of all, we're putting significant money on the table. We're saying the federal government is prepared to spend $30 billion over 5 years. And our goal is, at that 5-year mark, for every parent across the country to have access to high quality childcare for an average of $10 a day. Now, why as finance minister do I see this as such an important element of our growth agenda? We've done some calculations here in the Department of Finance, and the economists here believe that if we're able to do this, and it's going to take a lot of work, it's not just about putting it down on paper in the budget, this will be the most transformative policy for the Canadian economy since NAFTA. This could permanently boost Canada's productive capacity, could permanently boost our GDP by 1.2%. That's great. And we really need growth. It will do that by increasing women's participation in the labor force, create lots of great jobs in early learning and childcare. And there is a third kind of long-term benefit, which is if we get this right, 20 years from now, we're going to have a generation of real Canadian super kids who have had excellent early learning. Not that the current kids are not super. I have 3 kids who are already Canadian super kids. But the children who have had the benefit of this national high quality early learning and childcare system will be even better educated. So that will lift our country up too. So that's why it is such an important element of our growth agenda.
So, Minister, it's fitting and thoughtful that you acknowledge the leadership of Quebec on this file. I think some people in the news have called it the Quebec model, extending the Quebec model across the rest of the country. That also highlights the unique nature of Canada's federal experience in so many regards. Can you talk to us about how early conversations, if any, are going with Canada's premiers on this? Have you thought about how we make this a reality? Because it's been tried before, but federalism has been an interesting lever in that conversation. So give us some insights into how that's going, or how you plan to tackle that.
Oh, you said that so politely and diplomatically, David. Canada is a confederation. We're a country where provinces and territories have a great degree of responsibility and authority. There was someone who once compared, and I have to go look up who this quote comes from, this image comes from, because it's such a great one, compared the constitutional structure of Canada to a bumblebee and said, on paper, it looks impossible, but actually the bumblebee does fly. And I think that is a really good way of putting it. And so, I'll just go back to the point you started with, that our federal structure actually one benefit of it is it allows different provinces and territories to try different things. And I would say an attentive federal government, when it sees that something is working, will say, hey, let's do it for the whole country. And I've talked about Quebec and early learning and childcare. I could offer the example of Saskatchewan and Medicare. And I could also offer the example of BC and a price on pollution. So I think we should really acknowledge how we can learn from each other. Having said that, you're right. To build a system of early learning and childcare is going to require partnership and collaboration between the federal government and provinces and territories. We've had some conversations already. I've had some conversations. Ahmed Hussein, my colleague, has had some conversations. I think it's fair now to give the provinces and territories a little bit of time to digest what we've put in the budget. And we've put some serious money on the table, as well as some ambitious objectives. And our approach is going to be to look for willing and ambitious partners. I am optimistic we'll find them. And I'm optimistic for two reasons. The first is I'm a finance minister, right? So, my husband now says when we walk down the street, I'm looking for sources of economic growth. I'm just like scanning the horizon, because once you're responsible for the budget, that's how you look at the world. And I know that my counterparts, the finance ministers of provinces and territories, look at the world the same way. And what I'm going to say to them is, we are going to help you put in place a policy that is going to drive growth. That's got to be appealing. The second thing that makes me optimistic is I'm counting on Canadians. This is going to be hard. It is not a project that will deliver immediate gratification, and it's complicated and it's about building. But I think Canada is ready for this. I think Canada is a country that knows how to build for the future. And I'm counting on Canadians across the country to help me and to say, yeah, we're ready for this and we need it.
It's a build. Time, care, attention, and dollars, it sounds like, are going to be key ingredients to the success. Minister, if we can go to another theme, one of the phrases that's come out of the budget and has been repeated by your colleagues across the country is that this budget's meant to help all Canadians build back better, and build back better across a number of different platforms and planks. I think, when I looked at the budget in synopsis, it's obviously addressing the immediate and the urgent around COVID and the recovery. You outlined that as a key plank and priority. I think one of the observations I made, and we've talked about this in other events, is the stillness that social distancing and isolation has given us has called attention to some of the social realities and the justice or absence of justice in some of the communities across Canada. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's in this budget to address the urgent? We know there's lots in the budget that addresses the urgent around COVID, but also the important around some of the communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, or the pandemic's ability to highlight some of the impacts on those communities.
For sure, David. And, one of the perspectives and sort of one of the analytical perspectives that we brought to the budget was looking at Canada and saying, what has the COVID recession actually done? And we were very careful not to kind of say, okay, it's a recession, go to your shelf of economics textbooks and take out the textbook recipe for fighting a recession. We realized this was a recession of a very particular type, and that had been very, very uneven, right? People have talked about it being a K-shaped recession. Some people and some sectors are doing better than ever, but there are others that are extremely hard hit. And the hard hit groups, there is consensus on who they are. It's women, it's young people, it's small businesses, it is low-wage workers, especially racialized ones. Mm-hmm. And there is a real intersection there. So I think this is a moment in our country when we really have to think about systemic racism, when we really have to see the reality that, I am a big believer that our diversity is our strength. I think Canada is an amazing country with an amazing vision of itself encompassing everyone, but we're not always true to that vision. And this budget definitely invests in pulling us up to what I would say is our ideal of ourselves. Something that I would especially point to is there is $300 million in this budget to support Black Canadian communities, including something which really came from Black Canadian communities, which is a $200 million endowment to support Black communities. And there, you know, we had extensive conversations with people in the community. And I really want to acknowledge the work of our Toronto caucus, of Ahmed Hussein, of Greg Fergus. These were people who really led that effort. And so I'm really, really glad that that's there. And I do want to point to one other element in the budget that, to my mind, will be transformative. And that is real support for low-wage workers. And there's a real intersectionality there, right? Low-wage workers, racialized Canadians are disproportionately likely to be low-wage workers. There are a lot of women who are low-wage workers. Lots of, you know, if you are an immigrant woman, racialized Canadian, you're very likely to fall into that category. And I think that one thing that the pandemic has really shown us is who actually is an essential worker in our society. And I think it has revealed that essential workers are the people who work the hardest in our society and often get paid the least. And actually, to my mind, it is just unacceptable for a person to work full-time in Canada and still live in poverty. So this budget has a significant, more than $8 billion investment in increasing the Canada Workers Benefit. And that's a benefit you get if you're working, but you're still poor. In this budget, 1 million more Canadians are going to be eligible for it. It's going to lift 100,000 people out of poverty. And I'll tell you, I think that it's something that people really recognize we need. I did one round table with young Black Canadians, and each one of them told me what they wanted and thought should be in the budget. There was a lot of stuff about youth. There was a lot of stuff about this endowment fund, which is in there. But the person who touched me the most was a young Black woman. And she said, you know what I want you to do? I want you to help my grandmother. She's an immigrant from Jamaica. She's 72 years old. She works in a long-term care facility, and she doesn't make very much money. And I have to say to that young woman, I was so struck by the fact that you made a pitch. You had this moment to make a pitch to the finance minister. You didn't talk about yourself. You talked about your grandmother. And I really took that to heart.
That's amazing. Yes, that is amazing. As I'm listening to you and listening to these numbers, $8 billion in that program's a big number. We talked about the money you've committed to early childhood. There are some questions. I'm getting them on the screen here on the iPad. We've seen some pre-submitted questions. How do you reconcile the spending with the recovery, the deficit we're just being focused in on? There's a lot of discussion about phrases like fiscal firepower. Do we have the fiscal firepower we need? Minister, there are critics in the room and outside the room around the level of spending that's happening right now. What's your answer to that? How do you reconcile the spending with the headwinds that are in front of the economy right now?
So let me give a three-part answer, if I may, David. And I'm going to start by saying I really believe that the best way to pay off our debt is with robust growth. Growth really solves a lot of challenges. So that's the philosophy behind this budget. And I'm very clear about that. And I'm very clear that I think that is the right way for Canada to go. The second thing I want to say to Canadians is, if you are worried, please know I worry even more than you. I worry about everything in the budget. And I'm generally a worrying kind of person. And I can tell you sort of the institution of the Department of Finance is a cautious and prudent and careful place. And I say that because it's important for people to know they can have real confidence in the numbers that we put forward. And I want to give you a proof point of that, David, which is we forecast in the fall economic statement a deficit for the past year, for 2020-2021, of $381.6 billion. And on Monday, we said, actually, the deficit for 2020-2021 is going to be $354.2 billion. So significantly lower than we provisioned for. It's lower than the Parliamentary Budget Officer forecast as well. So I just say that to give people a sense that, yes, this is a bold and ambitious budget. I think Canada needs ambition and investment, but we're doing that carefully and thoughtfully. And then the final thing I want to say to people is we were very careful to ensure that our investments all fell within a reasonable and sustainable fiscal track. So I would really point people to the fact that you see in this budget a clearly declining debt to GDP ratio, a debt to GDP ratio that goes down to 49.2% in 25-26. And the same is true of the deficit. By 25-26, the deficit goes down to just above 1%. And that's a reasonable, sustainable framework. We are still, I mean, I know that these are big numbers. Let me assure you, I know they're big numbers. But Canadians should also appreciate that Canada today, even after this extraordinary spending, still has the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. And there's a simple reason for that. Everyone else has had to spend a lot of money to get through COVID too.
You mentioned everyone else, Minister. Before you were Finance Minister, you were Foreign Affairs Minister. So you were working closely with the U.S. diplomatic corps, with the White House. I'm sure you've continued that role as Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. One of the big discussions coming out of the Biden administration is sustainability and a green economy. Net zero is a theme and a focus of that administration. The government's budget is suggesting that net zero is a theme and a focus for Canada. Can you talk to me a little bit about the very ambitious reduction targets that the Prime Minister announced for 2030 and how the measures in the budget play into a plan?
Yeah, for sure. And let me just start by saying something that really became crystallized in my mind. I guess it was 3 weeks ago now, which was the week of the annual spring meetings of the IMF World Bank. I spent that week in tons and tons of international meetings and some bilaterals. And, you know, David, I was a journalist for many, many years before I became a politician. And so I often find myself thinking, what's the headline from this meeting that I'm in? And at the end of the week, I thought to myself, the headline, what's going to be the headline for 2021 when historians look back on it? And for sure, obviously, people are going to say it was the year of COVID, the year of the end of the fight against COVID. But I really think people are also going to say that 2021 was the year that the world made a decisive and irrevocable shift to a green economy. That's really important for Canadians to really get because, you know, the world is going down that path, especially, but not only the industrialized economies. We had better be on that road too. And we had better be in the front of the pack. Our jobs and our economic future depends on it. And, you know, again, of course, the planet depends on it. Of course, biodiversity depends on it. All those things for sure. But I also want to make a very clear economic case to Canadians for Canada investing strongly in that green transformation. And that's what this budget does. I will highlight three things in it on the green transformation side. Really significant investments in nature legacy. And as a downtown Toronto MP, I can't resist pointing out that includes nature inside cities. Urban dwellers deserve nature too. There's a big investment there. I hope some of it will go towards keeping our amazing Toronto ravines even more amazing. And that holds for cities across the country. So nature legacy, a big thing. The Net Zero Accelerator. In December, we put $3 billion into that fund. In this budget, we put an additional $5 billion. And this is money to help our existing industries, the foundations of the Canadian economy in natural resources, in manufacturing, to help them do that green shift. And a lot of them are already working very hard on it. We think we can give them a boost. And then the final thing, which is really, really important on the green front in the budget, is some very significant new tax incentives to help, again, give a push to Canada's clean tech sector, give a push to important technologies like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, to green hydrogen. And again, those are the technologies of the future. Canada has some real expertise there already. These very powerful tax incentives are going to help us do it even more. And the final thing I'm going to say when we're talking about the green transition is when the world looks back at 2021, I think the world is going to say this is the year that Canada developed a broad political consensus around the need to price pollution and to price carbon. And what I was struck by at the IMF World Bank meetings is the clear view, and the IMF has written about this, that if you really, really want to reduce GHG emissions, a robust carbon pricing plan has to be the foundation of your effort. We've done that in Canada. And I think that we should all really, I'm not too much of a believer in drinking our own Kool-Aid and patting ourselves on the back and stuff. On the other hand, Canadians can be a little overly modest sometimes. This is a big thing we've accomplished as a country, and it is recognized on the international arena as something significant that Canada has done that a lot of other countries haven't done yet.
Yeah. Minister, as we're talking, I mentioned we have participants from across the country. As we're talking, my iPad is, it's like blowing up. And there's questions here from Alberta and Saskatchewan, and even one from British Columbia. So I'm gonna try to aggregate the comments into a question here, and it's around net zero. I'm going to say to you that achieving economy-wide net zero with the oil and gas is impossible, and I'm going to ask you for your response, or for you to help Canadians understand how we're engaging the oil and gas sector in Canada currently, what their response is to net zero, and how we plan to move forward on this file together.
So look, I am actually originally from Northern Alberta, and I'm also finance minister. And when you put those two things together, that means I have a very clear appreciation of the importance of the energy sector to the Canadian economy, of the importance of the energy sector to Canada's exports, of the importance of the energy sector to our balance of payments. Looking at things from a climate perspective, if you do the math on GHG emissions, the energy sector has to be part of the solution. That's where the emissions are. And so that's where you have to do the work to reducing them. And again, I don't want to sound too Pollyanna-ish, but I am actually really impressed by the work that Canada's energy sector has been doing already on the emissions front. This is one of the most innovative and forward-looking sectors of our economy. I really believe that the people working there totally understand and not just accept, but embrace the reality that climate change is real and that we have to act. And I think one of the areas where we're going to see the most exciting progress in our climate change effort is actually precisely in our energy sector, in work there reducing our emissions. And that's why I mentioned the carbon capture, utilization, and storage.
Minister, we're getting close to the end, so I'm going to give you a few quick questions.
And you want quick answers? Okay, I'll try.
No, I'll try.
I heard that as the subtext, David. I'll try.
I might cut you off slightly, but I'll be polite about it. How's that?
That's the deal.
Good. So, Minister, you know better than most as an elected official that politics are about choices, budgets are about choices. When I look at the headlines from Monday to probably Wednesday, many people are calling this an election budget. Is this an election budget?
No. This is a budget to govern Canada. This is a budget to punch our way out of the COVID recession and for long-term growth.
All right. Long-term growth, punching our way out of the recession. I think, I've had the opportunity to listen to you talk about how you drive transformation and how you drive change. And one of those ways is to listen to critics, to take the best of the criticism that's being offered to you. Based on some of the criticisms that have been given to you and the government on this budget, is there one piece that was compelling? Is there one piece of criticism where you said, you know what, that's thoughtful, it's going to help us do a better job in the future?
So I do really agree with you that listening to your critics is one of the hardest and most important things in life. And actually, as a former journalist turned politician, I have often reflected on the fact that, although it's hard, like I'm talking now about reporters, right? It can be hard going out there and being asked hard questions. It makes you so much better as a government, the anticipation of that. So I agree with your premise. In terms of, have the critics said something where I've gone like, we didn't include that? I would say, David, we spent a lot of time listening to critics before tabling the budget. And this huge document is the result. I'm going to show you how big it is, right? It's a huge document. It's the result of literally tens of thousands of consultations. So we have tried to be thoughtful about, lots of different concerns. What I will say is, this budget is also not the alpha and omega. Like, it's a big budget. It's an important moment for Canada. And this budget does a lot because it has to. But I would never claim that every single problem in Canada is addressed by this budget. That also would be impossible.
Yeah.
So work still to do.
More work to be done. As you look back, I opened this acknowledging that this is a unique budget for size, for scale, for spending, but also for the faces and the names that are tabling the budget in the House of Commons. It's a legacy budget in and of itself. I think we have to acknowledge that. I'll do that for you in a nonpartisan way. I think it's a powerful statement for us to have a female finance minister tabling a budget of this scale. If you were to fast forward 10 years and look back on this budget, what's the one piece or one or two pieces of the budget that you'd like to have to stand the test of time as a legacy to Canadians?
Okay. Long-term growth and jobs. I really want people to say, wow, Canada just got on a new long-term, stronger growth trajectory and everyone got their job back. I have to say early learning and childcare. And I have to say green transformation.
Those are powerful elements. Is this a budget you could run on, Minister?
That I could run on? I mean, I said to you, David, like this budget was not designed to be an election budget. This budget was designed to meet the urgent needs of Canada for today and to build for tomorrow. But if your question is, do I believe that the verdict of Canadians about this budget will be positive? I sure as heck hope so. There can sometimes be a view, and I will admit to having been guilty of this when I was a pundit, that there is this world which is pure and good and unsullied called policy. And there's this world of good policy. And then there is this world which is sort of yucky and a little bit dirty, which is called the world of good politics. And I think there's something profoundly undemocratic about believing there is a distinction between those two. I think that good policy should be good politics. And if it's not, you need to ask yourself, is my policy really that good? Or maybe I'm just really bad at explaining it to people. And I think, a mistake that I would say over the past couple of decades, policy elites have made is not listening to people enough. I think people have a very good and clear understanding of their own interests and of what's good for them. And to make good policy, listen to that. Like, listen to that young woman who said to me, I'm worried about my grandmother. She works, more than 40 hours a week. She's 72. She's an immigrant from Jamaica. She still lives in poverty. That young woman knew exactly what her grandmother needs. And so I would say if you have good policies, people should support them.
Wonderful. Minister, thank you for taking the time to be with us today, for telling your story and this government story around recovery, jobs, growth, and the economy. It's been a pleasure to have you here with us at the Canadian Club. I'm going to invite my colleague, Vandana from Catalyst Canada, to give you a formal thank you and close the session.
Thank you, David, and good morning, everyone. My name is Vandana Janeja. I have the privilege of being the Executive Director at Catalyst in Canada. We're really grateful for the opportunity today to partner with the Canadian Club of Toronto in today's event. And on behalf of the Canadian Club and everyone who's joined us here for this informative conversation this morning, I'd like to thank you, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, for your time, your vision, and your commitment, in particular to supporting women. You truly are an inspiration. The investment that Canada is making in affordable, quality, and accessible childcare, it really represents a historical step forward. It's a step that we know we will have significant and long-term lasting benefits from, not only for parents, for children, but for communities and for the Canadian economy as well. It's also no secret how devastating the pandemic has been, and we know that it has had a disproportionate impact, Minister Freeland, as you've mentioned, on women, young people, small businesses, low-wage workers, and especially racialized individuals. You've stated, as we know, that diversity is our strength, and we need to take an intersectional lens to the work that we do, with a mind to systemic racism as well. At Catalyst, we share our commitment to accelerating progress for women and for underrepresented groups and building workplaces that work for everyone. We know that resilience of our economy depends on getting our talented individuals back to work and helping them to advance through the ranks so that they can upskill, reskill, and put those skills and expertise to work. Minister, I also appreciated your comments on the green transformation, in particular, including significant investments in nature legacy, the net zero accelerator, and the push to clear tech sector. So we thank you for all of your efforts and for your bold leadership. I'd also like to give a quick shout out and thank you to you, David. Thanks for your skillful moderation this morning for the conversation, and also for your commitment to gender equity and inclusion. You've really been a terrific addition this year to our Catalyst Canada Advisory Board, and I know we've had some real courageous conversations, which I valued deeply, and I look forward to our work together. Lastly, thank you so much to the sponsor today, Canada Life, for generously sponsoring the event, to the AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications, and livemeeting.ca for making it possible for us to come together virtually today. Guests, thank you for joining us this morning. And to all of you, let's continue to support our talent across Canada. Here's to a strong and lasting recovery. Thank you.